Welcome back to another impactful episode of the PSDA podcast. This is Craig King, your host, and we are recording this podcast from beautiful Charleston, South Carolina. Well, specifically North Charleston, but it's Charleston,
It's
right?
Charleston.
Charleston, right?
Yep.
We are preparing for Ed Camp, but by the time you listen to this, Ed Camp will be over. But we're excited about being down here for Ed Camp Palmetto. Patrick is done a lot of great things to prepare us for this upcoming week. I want to give him a big shout out.
Thanks, Craig. No, Craig, I'm excited that we are on the road for our first on-the-road remote podcast recording. I think the next step is to do a live recording with a live audience. I think that's what we got to do.
That is a great idea, Patrick.
Yeah.
We have enough fans out there to do a live recording.
Absolutely. I mean, we've got 2 extra microphones, so we can cover all of our fans.
Let's do it.
It'll
we'll
be
have
great.
guest spots, but you did not, as usual, we're running our mouths for the first 2 minutes, but you did not come to hear about that. But anyway, policy. Yeah. We've had some movement on some really good items.
Yes.
So let's jump into that. Educator Assistance Act.
Yeah, let's go with the headline. For the first time out of 5, the South Carolina Senate has scheduled the Educator Assistance Act for a subcommittee hearing on Wednesday, March the 5th. So this is the next step in the legislative process. This is the farthest that this bill has ever made it. And so this is a positive sign. It's a testament to advocacy by PSTA members and other supporters of educators. The Senate heard significantly from the public about a desire for this bill to move. So we'll have a subcommittee hearing, and then once we're done with that, then we will move forward hopefully to full committee, and then it would move on to the Senate from there. So still several steps to go, but this is an essential and a really important next step.
Yeah, that's good, Patrick. We're excited about the movement. Patrick had a goal of having 1,043 responses, but we did hit 900. So we're
that's right. We shut it down a little bit early, but that's okay because the goal was never the number. The goal was to get the bill to move, and if the bill moved before we hit the number, then that's just gravy.
That's a T-shirt. Kind of long, but
it's a long T-shirt.
Long T-shirt, long sleeve.
Yep.
Get it?
Aha, I got it.
Not really that good, but are funny. All right, so budget. Budget should be debated in about a week?
Yeah, the budget will be debated in the House the week of March the 11th. That's what includes the $1,500 pay increase to every cell in the bachelor's, master's, plus 30, and doctorate lanes. So that will be some exciting news. That one thing that PSTA members would have seen in their Legislative Alert Network, the most recent email, is that while there's a lot to celebrate in this budget, one thing that is not quite as encouraging is that the Ways and Means budget does not include full funding for healthcare costs, specifically increase in costs for the state health plan. That's the first time in over a decade that's happened. Now, to be fair, healthcare costs continue to get crazy in this country. I mean, that's something that I think every American family knows. And in the same way, the federal government feels pressure in Medicare and Medicaid because healthcare costs keep going up. The state of South Carolina is not immune. And so the General Assembly has done I think, a laudable job over the last decade not allowing monthly premiums for state employees to go up. And even in this budget, the Ways and Means Committee is still proposing a substantial investment in covering the increased cost that would be defrayed by individual premiums. But by not fully funding it, the average monthly premium would go up about $36. So that's not an insignificant amount of money over a 12-month period. And so that's something that we are hopeful that maybe the House can revisit that on the floor, or even more likely the Senate can look at that because the Senate will get another revenue projection before the budget gets to the finish line. And if revenues come in ahead of where the House is working from, then hopefully the Senate can take that extra money and apply it to this issue that doesn't just affect teachers, and it affects everybody that's on the state health plan.
So from a teacher standpoint, if they're listening to us and they say that, that $36 a paycheck is significant, would you encourage them to try to leverage their relationships in the House, or kind of wait until the budget?
I would go ahead and talk to your representative, because and the Ways and Means Committee is not insensitive to that fact. They again have committed substantial money here, and so do I think it's more likely to change in the Senate than the House? I do, just because changing a actual line item expenditure like that of that scale on the floor during debate is difficult and not typical in the House. But it's certainly worth sharing that concern with your member of the House, because even if the Senate adds more to cover that cost, that would put the Senate and House versions of the budget out of agreement with each other. And so in conference committee, they would have to pick either the Senate or House position. And if representatives have already heard from constituents that, hey, we want to see this fully covered, then when the House members go to conference with the senators, they can say, well, this is a point that we are willing to accept the Senate position because we've heard loudly from our constituents.
Makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. So we have some other bills with some movement. Social media bill.
Yeah, the social media bill has now made it from the House to the Senate. It'll be interesting to see what happens next with that bill, because there is a Senate social media bill that is focused narrowly on, well, I can't say narrowly, it's a big bill, but specifically on the issue of age-appropriate design code for social media platforms. That bill was introduced by Senator Sean Bennett from Dorchester. They've already had one subcommittee hearing on the bill where they didn't advance it. Senator Bennett in that meeting basically put social media companies on notice. He publicly said in the hearing that the only people to testify on the bill were all in support of it, and they were local groups like PSTA. Senator Bennett at the end of the hearing said, well, I've heard from lots of social media companies privately, but none of them showed up here to talk publicly. So if they've got something they're concerned about, they should probably show up and share it publicly. And if not, then we'll just assume they don't have a concern. So that bill is actually inserted into the House social media bill. So I don't know this for certain, but it would be a possibility that next time Senator Bennett's subcommittee meets, they could add the House bill to the agenda, and then they could work from the House bill because it already includes his bill in it, and that gets it that much closer to the finish line because it's already passed the House of Representatives.
Got it. Anything else making any movement? And then we talked about the top. Well, how did I forget? ESAs.
Yeah. So the big news of the week in the education space was the House of Representatives passed their version of S62, the bill to reinstate educational scholarship account use for private school tuition. That bill, we're recording this on Friday, February 28th. On Tuesday, March the 4th, look at me change the month in my head.
There you go.
That bill will be read across the desk in the Senate, at which point the Senate can either concur with House amendments, and if they do that, the bill goes to the governor for signature, and he's already said he'd sign it, or the Senate can non-concur, meaning they reject the House amendments, which would trigger a conference committee on the bill. Not 100% certain, but non-concurrence would appear to be a real possibility because there's some substantial differences in the House and Senate versions. Three in particular. One is the funding stream. The Senate would pay for ESAs out of lottery funds. The House reverts to using tax revenues out of the general fund. The second thing is that the Senate maintains the existing law's income eligibility criteria for an ESA. A student can only receive it at full implementation of the program if the student's family earns at or below 400% of poverty, which is about $128,000 annual income for a family of four. The House struck any income eligibility requirement. So any family, regardless of income, would be ESA eligible under the House bill. And then the third, and I think most significant difference, is the Senate version complies with existing law, which says at full implementation, which is the 27-28 school year, there would be a limit of 15,000 ESAs available per year. That's the Senate position. The House struck that out and instead inserted language that would peg the number of ESAs per year to appropriations. So basically it would become contingent to funding. So it could be 15,000 a year. It could be 40,000 a year. It could be more.
Like a floodgate.
It does, and it's honestly kind of, I think, problematic for budget writers, but I think it's also a challenge for families. Like I've got a junior in high school right now, and so I am neck deep and worried about life and Palmetto Fellows and everything else with lottery scholarships. But as a family, we can plan forward effectively because we know if our daughter hits the eligibility criteria, it will be funded. That House language on the ESA bill, a family could meet every eligibility criteria, apply for an ESA, get to May or June or whenever the budget's finalized and find out, oh, they didn't fund enough ESAs, you don't have one this year. That, as an educator, I don't like that. Like, regardless of how I feel about ESAs from a constitutional lens or a policy lens, I don't like families having uncertainty when it comes. So that's a significant difference from the Senate position. If they go to conference, I think that issue alone will probably be the driving force behind that. I think if the House had largely constrained itself to just changing the funding stream, then the Senate might have concurred. But I don't know that for certain. And the Senate may concur. Yeah. Someone may be listening to this on Wednesday, March the 5th, and going, man, don't take any financial advice from Patrick Kelly because he's a terrible prognosticator, which is true because I think every year the South Carolina Gamecocks are going to win in football and the Bills will win the Super Bowl. So
you took it there.
What do I know?
Hey, I'm not going to even follow that one up. Go Gamecocks, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
It's women's basketball season.
Yeah,
we're good.
It is women's basketball season. So I think we covered everything.
We covered it. We covered it.
All right. Well, Patrick and I are about to go eat some pizza from Vinny's. I think that's where we're eating pizza from.
The finest in North Charleston, I think.
Finest in North Charleston. Who knew Charleston was known for their pizza?
I did not. But I'm looking forward to finding out what they have to offer.
Well, we appreciate you, Patrick. And big shout out next week on the docket for Hill Days. We have Spartanburg 3 coming on Tuesday, and then we have a joint Hill Day with Pickens and Oconee on Wednesday. So we're excited.
Golden Corner coming to the State House.
That's right. They're coming to the State House, small but mighty school districts, and we're excited to have them join us next week. We're going to enjoy Ed Camp tomorrow. I'm sure you'll see all the highlights from that. If you didn't come, you missed it. I can go ahead and say that, even though it hadn't happened yet at the time of this recording.
Spoke it into being.
But it has been another impactful episode of the PSA Podcast. I'm Craig King, your host, along with your favorite guest, Patrick Kelly. We'll see you next time.